Well, thank you everyone for joining today, and those who are online or from where they are. Thank you so much for joining us. Uh, what we're going to talk about today is how did a small conference in Warsaw become a global movement reaching 2 billion people? Um, and it's been quite a journey, and we're still trying to figure out what is the demand, what drives this thing, and we're working on our second theory of change, and I would really welcome your ideas and what have we touched on. So I'm going to try to touch on some of the ideas, but basically let's go back to 213. What was happening in the world in 213? What was the state of the planet in 213 when the GLF was founded? First of all, the global temperature was 0.68 degrees above pre-industrial ages. Today it's 1.8, so almost double. So Millennium Development Goals. Coming in 215, 17 targets. We hit 3.5 of the 17, and they were important ones, but we missed all the others. And two in particular, biodiversity, conservation of biodiversity, and also integration of sustainable development, completely failed, completely. The ACE targets were in their third or fourth year, but already moving and finding out that despite all the great work, we were going to miss all of the 20 targets. And by the end, biodiversity would be in a free fall. UNFCCC in 213 for the first time brought forest in. Forest mitigation activities, that was in 213. And that year we had a 28% deforestation rate in Brazil, Amazon. So if you can imagine a 28% deforestation in Amazon, that's a lot of biodiversity. So in other words, if you looked at the world at that time, we were not in great shape. In fact, the Earth was deteriorating in almost every target you had. At the same time, was it all doom and gloom? Did we have a give up? Well, there was some positive. There was a company called Wilmar, which many of you know, the world's largest producer of palm oil, in 2013 announced a policy to have deforestation free palm oil. And that was an amazing, they produced 40% of the world's palm oil. And they did it on their own without a government or a policy or a direction. At the same time, people always give the chlorofluorocarbon example. In 1987, the scientists discovered the the hole in the ozone over the Antarctic. 2 years later, there was a treaty to do a 50% ban on chlorofluorocarbons of hairspray and the rest. 3 years later in Montreal, they banned it completely. Now it's outlawed and the ozone is recovering. So against that context, we looked at GLF, and it was C4 ECRAF, C4 Center for International Forestry Research, World Agroforestry Center, which is my parent organization, the World Bank, UNEP, and a lot of other partners. We basically were saying whatever we're doing is not working. We have to change the way we do development and the way we look at the world. And the way we look at the world was to look at it holistically. We decided we wanted to use the landscape approach. I'll come back to that. And look at the world and try to produce landscapes around the world that are very simple, that were productive, prosperous, very important, equitable, and resilient. We would do it by bringing voices of people that were cut out of the conversation, that were on the margins, indigenous leaders, women, youth, scientists from areas that were most affected. And we were going to bring them, and youth in particular, and women, and bring them into the discussion. We were going to do it on some simple values of respect, equity, and inclusiveness. And we were also going to do it with a belief that we could change the world. And believe me, how many people in the first 3 years said I should stop saying that, we can't do it, but we continue to try. Let's see, we'll get this to go. So this is what was happening at the time. We were working in sectors, and everyone knows that. And believe it or not, they do now, but they didn't then. We were working in sectors even within forestry. And some were looking at communities at C4, and some were looking at reduced impact logging, and others were looking at different things, productivity of products, and then agriculture. And with agriculture, there were soils and there were water, and no one was talking to each other. We were all working in sectors. We were locked in our sectors. So we decided to do this landscape approach, to look at the world holistically. Sorry, I can't leave the stage here. And if we look back, where's the landscape approach come from? And a lot of you will know this. in Germany. It came from a man named Alexander von Humboldt, which I think is a visionary, and we all ought to study him because he had a simple idea. He wrote a book in 1834 where he said, and I got to get this exactly right. Hang on one sec. Sought to unify diverse branches of scientific knowledge and culture into an integrated view of the landscape. That was in 1834. He's considered the father of geography, modern geography, also environmentalism, and also ecology. This person was amazing. If we'd listened to him, we would have been a lot better off. Okay. I have to do this by hand. So with the landscape approach, we decided to have a conference. It was our first one in Warsaw. We thought we maybe have 200 people. There were 3 of us putting on. We thought it would just be a small group like this. I remember standing in the snow, begging people to come into the plenary, and everybody was saying no one's going to show up. And then 1,300 people showed up, and ministers and activists and a whole group of people. And they all wanted to meet other people that outside of their sector. At that time, we did a survey. We love data. We've collected data for 10 years. We did a survey and it said that 60% of the people there had not heard of the landscape approach or didn't fully understand it. Then after that, we went to Peru and we thought, okay, we'll do one more. We had 1,800 people show up, and WRI launched the LA 2020 there, that program. Sorry, I have to do this by hand. Then in Paris, this was a change, 2015. We had 3,300 people show up. This was a small science conference. And we had 80 mayors, 70, 80 mayors show up to talk about watersheds. And then said they pledged to restore it. We had 28 ministers. We had indigenous leaders. We had youth. We had artists. We had all kinds of people coming. And we only had 10 people running this conference. I tell you, behind the scenes, it was amazing. But at the same, there were also some important people there. One of them was a fellow, maybe some of you know, named Horst Freiberg, who was in BMU and forest ecologist. And he said, look, this is really great. We should bring it to Germany. And he spoke to someone named Johann Flaschbart, who's now the BMZ state secretary. At that time, he was at BMU. And he said, we want you to scale. Come to Germany. And we brought the secretariat here in Bonn. At that same time, Johann Rockström spoke at that conference at that time, talking about the planetary boundaries. We were passing 4 at that time. Now we're at 6. Where are we in 10 years? As we were saying, look at all the different places we've done conferences and learning programs. And now we've got 1 million youth in 175 countries that are active, they're participating, 10,500 organizations. And it's growing very, very quickly. And the charter members. Now we have 33 powerful charter members. And what have we done? What have we achieved? If we stop right now, we set out to achieve that the world would see landscapes as using the landscape approach. Every one of these have adopted the landscape approach, and everybody's talking about landscapes now. If we quit tomorrow, we've done it. You hear forest landscapes. I remember it's Collaborative Partnership on Forest. They refused to talk about forest landscapes. We were going to talk about SDG 15, and we weren't going to talk about all the others. And now everyone realized you can't solve one end SDG at a time. You've got to look at all of them at the same time. You can't look at gender and poverty and equity all one by one. You got to look at them together. And so we did that. And we're contributing to the SDGs, but now we've added the biodiversity. You can see our donors, BMZ, BMU, Development Ministry and Environment Ministry. Government of Luxembourg does finance. We're the knowledge platform for the FOLOR program, the world's largest program on sustainable value chains, run by Jeff and the World Bank. And Robert Bosch has been a huge supporter in Lavazza. But we also launched the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration together, and there's changed policy all over the world on lots of things. There's just C4, the parent organization. We started off as a science, led by science, and then we added knowledge later. And I'm going to talk, if you haven't heard about my new boss, our CEO, Eliane Oldajaro, she's the real director of GLF, not me. She has learned experience. She's the future of what I think the world is. She was born in Rwanda, Professor McGill, microgeneticist, And she's now transforming GLC4 ECRAF as a research institute, which all research institutes have to think about, because we don't have time for 10 years of research, to also do applied research and development. And that's one of the things we're working on now. Germany said, fine, let's don't stop. Let's keep going. I'm not going to go through all these, but basically we launched 5 innovations. And all of these I could do a conference on every one of them. And I'll go through them very quickly. They're on the website. But what is a digital knowledge commons? I didn't bring the book by Eleanor Ostrom called The Theory of the Knowledge Commons, which she predicted one day we'd be able to do a digital knowledge commons, which could integrate people have a vertical integration from the commons to the elite or to the academics and policymakers. And that's what we started to do. And GLF grew with the internet. When we started in 2013, there was 2.5 billion people on the net. And now there's 5.5. But this is called a Gephi chart. This tracks Twitter conversation. Sorry, I can't leave over here. So let's see if I get the tracker. Anyway, on the left, that's okay. On the left is a conversation. It's not really a conversation. It's back in those days they were saying, oh, social media can't do anything. I remember scientists saying, oh, well, what is it? It's just broadcasting. It doesn't do anything. But then this is GLF Peru, 6.7 people reached, but this is trying to be a conversation. This is disparate. This one's kind of starting to be, and then this is the next slide, is what changed GLF and what changed my whole thinking of the world. And sorry, this clicker doesn't work. This one. This is GLF Paris. This was the beginning of a digital revolution. And this was unheard of at that time, 2015. These are 3,000 people tweeting to each other in a conversation of 5,000 tweets, reaching 15 million people. And it's Governor Brown, and it's Paul Pullman, and all these others. But I sat and I looked at that, and I had it on my desk for 2 years saying, what if we could do this with 1 billion people? And at that time, there weren't enough online. But then we kept working on it. We started thinking about digital and reaching people that can't travel to these conferences and all the rest of it. And then look at what happened. Now, this is important because this is 2.5 billion people now, million people. This is engaged. Every one of our conferences reaches 20 million people, but these are every year, 2 million people now are engaging with the conference, engaging with the activities. They're fully involved. And that's the number I'm watching very closely. And what does a conference look like? What is a digital knowledge commons in action? This is GLF Africa that we just had some months ago. Now, if you look at that, there's several things about it. We are the Global South. And I think now they've told us stop using Global South and just talk about the South, which is what we listen to our audience, we listen to our community and what they tell us. They want to do climate justice. They want to know about loss and damage. We take on whatever subject the community wants to take on. And we have experts from those countries, not from the North, from Brazil. And then people are talking to people in their own language, in their own culture. And that, I think, is one of the things that gets people more and more. But look, Africa, Asia, Latin America, all coming in, and top 5 countries in this particular conference. But this is the one that the women I appreciate. This is one of our most important things. Since the beginning, our conferences where 50% speakers are women, every single time. And so you get 56% and 81% are from Africa, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean. And then what happens is the participants, women, are 46%. It sounds easy, but there's no one in the world doing this right now at this level in this kind of conference. But why am I putting this up? This was the weirdest thing we've seen in terms of communication. We did this really quickly. It was a small little 2-hour, basically a 2-hour webinar, but global, on restoration around the world. We didn't have any experts, didn't have time. So we just had practitioners, people that were growing trees and having problems in policy and all the rest of it. And that figure up above, this small little group, reached 10 million people in 2.5 hours, and also had 880,000 people engaging with this stuff, talking to each other. The chat was like a presidential debate in America. It was just rocking. As because practitioners want to talk to practitioners. People know what to do and they want to talk about it. And this is it. We find the people. If you want to change the narrative, change the people speaking. And these are powerful people. Musanda, who's head of the wetlands, the head of USAID. She's now the minister of the new indigenous ministry in Brazil. I can go on and on and on about powerful people and powerful women that are changing the narrative. And it's a big thing that has to happen now. And youth, since the beginning, youth are in everything we do. They're on every panel, they're involved. There's 1 million around the world. We have job markets, we have training, we have various other things. And it's almost all volunteers. They're cut out of the conversation. They want to be part of this. And then they're doing projects. I don't know what I was doing in college, but I wasn't restoring lands in Africa, Kenya, or Peru. They actually got projects, and they're young people, and they said, hey, look at what we're doing. They start writing in. We're doing really cool stuff here. Can we be part of GLF? So we started a restoration steward program. We give them $5,000. They're not pilot projects. They're existing projects working. We give them $5,000 to scale them. We let them speak in the conferences. We let them part of it. 17 are led by women. They've got nurseries and training. It's amazing what these young people are doing. Here's an example. This young woman named Charity is in the Maasai areas in the Rift Valley. And you can see the area to the left is what it looked like before she started her program. And she's put a simple thing, put a fence up, but the elephants kept knocking down the fence. So she put beehives. This was the unique thing. And the beehives kept the elephants away. And then this is happened to change the livelihood of the people in that community. And now we can scale it across the Maasai areas in the Rift Valley. And just a young person doing it on her own and from that community. So what happens? Stewards then become chapters. That was the other thing. Communities that were doing bigger projects around the world. And they were writing to us, we want to be part, but we couldn't manage that. So these are community-led chapters. They own it. They manage it. We mentor them if they want, and we help them find funds. Again, we give them $5,000. This is like a low-cost development model. But every single one of them is scaling, raising money, meeting ministers. And I'll show you some examples. Again, 15 of them are led by women. This is the kind of work. They have nurseries, they have educational programs, they teach schools. And what happens in development? You get a $5 million grant, you work in a village, you get to know everyone, and then you leave, and the project might go. These are already going before we go there, and they're going to go after we leave. It's their community, it's their work. And here's a really great example. This young woman, Shinta, is a Dayak from Kalimantan, the Dayak tribe. And she lives in an area that had the highest, it was a hot spot in the 215 fires, the peatland fires in Indonesia. That was one of the major environmental events of that year. And they're replanting peatlands. And now they've started, she started off as a steward. Now she's become a chapter. She's raising, they're raising about $50,000, $60,000 a year now, and they hope to raise more. And we're helping them raise funds and scale them and meet ministers. And they speak at all of our conferences, and they get the local voice. And we need those voices. And she's starting a film festival. I mean, these guys are amazing. And then around it all, we have learning programs. Started by Wageningen University, was our landscape academy. Now it's run by C4ECRAF. We have 30,000 doing the MOOCs. We have blended learning, demand-driven. And we've started curriculum building in Africa with 12 universities to build landscape restoration. And this is the cool new thing we're doing, digital campus. There's a landscape cafe where you can do a conversation about any topic you want. And then virtual classrooms and then resource hub. We have hundreds of white papers and small, short 2-3 page papers that you can use. And then we'll change now. We're going to go to finance. Why finance? We always had finance in our conferences. And then in Peru in 2014, we had a fellow named Mark Burrows. He was vice chairman of Credit Suisse at that time, and Paul Pullman, who was head of Unilever at that time. They spoke next to an indigenous leader. Paul Pullman made a deal with the indigenous leader, and they started working together in the Amazon. But then he came up to me after and said, whatever you're doing is great, but it has no good. Just to have us up on stage is not enough. We don't understand what you guys are talking about, and you guys don't understand what we're talking about. So we set up a sort of a small forum, and we launched in London, a finance forum that's focused on finance, and only people that come to that one know how to build economic models and and talk finance. They're trying to do sustainable finance. And I tell you, in 2015, nobody was talking about sustainable finance. No one was interested. No one was talking about value change, really. IKEA and a few others, but we were way back there, even in 2015. And if you look at the number of finance guys that are going to Montreal or going to Dubai, and I don't mean the oil companies, I mean all the other guys, there's some businesses are now turned on and things are about to change. So we started the investment case. What have we learned and how do we break it up? Ketchum wanted me to talk about. This is what we got two issues with sustainable finance. One is greening finance. The financial sector is not geared or ready to do the kind of flexible investing that has to be done in the South or in small shareholders or small landholders. The disclosure reporting standards, it has to need more flexibility. They need a pipeline and they need capacity building among the people that want to do projects. People come with projects all the time, but they don't know how to build a model that these guys can hear in 4 minutes, which is the kind of time frame they work on. So this is where we started. We started in London, and now we've got an informal community of practice that goes to each one of these. In 2019, the government of Luxembourg invited us to be there. We have a partnership with them. It's going very well. And we're starting to make grants. We take on different subjects. Again, what people say we need, carbon markets. We did a training program on carbon markets. How do you measure carbon? How do you monitor it? How do you market it? And now all the problems with it. And now we're looking at biodiversity credits. And we keep on going. And this is where we're going with finance, because the cool stuff, and this is what I keep saying now, is all happening in the South. So we want to regionalize the investment case. We want to do it in Brazil. There's some great work being done there with locally managed funds run by indigenous groups, communities. Peru has got accelerators. Uganda has got accelerators. And Vietnam's doing some great stuff. We want to connect these projects with investors now. We want to find these investable projects. We want to build the capacity then and learn and teach them, not teach them, work with them and bring in people to show them how to present. What's the future? When you go back to those big programs, the Millennium Development Goals and the rest of it, and UNFCCC, we've been thinking about this recently, it's not going down below the top level. It's reaching Jakarta, but it's not reaching Kalimantan. The communities, the municipalities aren't embracing these big concepts. It's not being done in their language. It's not part of their culture. And it has to change. So what we think, we're going to do GLF country programs where the entire GLF program will be GLF Brazil is what we're working on now. And it'll be in Portuguese, it'll be in Spanish, it'll be managed by Brazilians, it'll be learning, it'll be youth, it'll be investment. And we're going to build these programs. It's low cost and it's local. And that's where I think, because in one place we're still not changing policy enough. And we want to figure out, and you can't change policy globally, you have to change it locally. And I think that's been another problem with the top-down approach that we've had for, I don't know, 100 years, I guess. And theory of change for the academics. This is our second theory of change. This was based on this theory that came out not so long ago, that if you could get 20% acting in a certain direction, in positive direction, you could influence the rest of the 80%. So we said, okay, let's go with that. And if you think about 8 billion people, I thought we could do that. We can reach 20%. We can certainly reach 10% in 5 years. Our target is 2030. So in this model, the people that are acting and doing all the right things, the chapters and the rest of it are up at the top. The aware and willing to act are second. And then the third are the unaware that just don't know what we should be doing. And almost everyone knows they should be doing something these days because it's no longer just the South. But this is the important part. Before, we were going from the top down. We were trying to do things from the global level and then doing this, but we want to do it from the local level. We need to shift everything bottom up in everything we do. So we want to localize and we want to accelerate what's working on the ground in these areas. And we want to connect those across those landscapes. And then we want to connect them with others around the world, Peru, learning what they're doing in Brazil or in Indonesia. And then we want to advocate for the best policies and the best practices. And then we want to globalize it. And then we want to increase the number of people acting to 1 billion people by 2030. We want to increase the number of aware and reduce the unaware. And with any luck, they say in theory, you should be able to pressure the unwilling, which is the tough one. The people that don't want to change, don't believe the change or whatever. This is my last slide. I want to go back to Alexander von Humboldt. Not only did he talk about, I mean, he did so many things. And if you don't know this guy, he's incredible. But one of the things was he motivated a holistic perception of a universe or Earth with one interacting entity. Well, that reminds me of someone else. And that is another person I have huge respect for, Johann Rockström, announced this week that he's calling for a paradigm shift to what he's calling a planetary commons. A planetary commons is what Alexander von Humboldt was talking about. And this is 200 years later. We should have been doing this all along. It's one landscape. They're all connected. Antarctica to the Amazon to Arctic. We need to connect it all and look at it that way. And in addition to his planetary boundaries, now he's this, and it's just doing amazing things. But why did GLF, why is it growing like this? And it's continuing to grow really, really large. We got great young people from all over the world working on this, but it's not that. It's something that a demand from the community. And this was what we did a Slido and we asked them, what do you think about when you think about GLF? And I think one of the things is that if you come to GLF, we really do believe you can change the world. And we always talk about hope. We have IPCC there. We don't run away from the truth. It's all there. We got all the numbers. We have Jane Goodall. We have all the people talking about just how bad things are. But we can turn this thing around. There's still time, and we believe it. And we're going to do it, but we're going to do it from the south up, where world's biodiversity is, where the real action is. Look at Brazil right now, and then look what might be happening in America. Brazil is where the great stuff's happening right now. And it's great. Same with Africa, same with Asia. The answers are there, and I think we can change things. Thank you very much.